Welcome back, everybody, to We Are TPM with myself, Kyle Teixeira, sitting again next to my co-host, John Teixeira. We are back this week to discuss considerations in election cycles. Now, if you have any considerations on calling us or considering considerations in election cycles or considering anything else, if you want to consider giving us a call at 817-818-9039 or shoot us an email at showmethemoney@wearetpm.com. Let's get into it. John Teixeira, what are you considering in this election cycle?
Kyle likes that word considerations, doesn't he? You know what? Election cycles bring a lot of uncertainty, and they bring a different market, and everybody wants to focus on something different depending on what side of the aisle you're on, or depending on how much you care and what stage of life you're in, or what you're doing with your life. All of those things have an impact on how much people are swayed by the election cycle.
Yeah, and I mean, the market can be swayed. It's not just during the election cycle. It can be considering where, for example, what environments the property you're considering buying might be in within the next 4 years, right? So we're just going to talk about all of them. So let's...
what do we consider an election cycle? We're kind of in one, right? So would you say from the time that we have two candidates to November 4th? Maybe even a little bit more?
I'd say this is almost a continuous thing when you're talking about consider. Well, yeah, it definitely seems like the election cycles never end. But
okay, so I'm glad you said that, because we're specifically the things we're talking about, we think are most impacted by the presidential cycle every 4 years, not just every election.
Well, you could also consider. I'm sure some of these topics might bring this up, but like officials that get elected, like I've mentioned in the past that your justice of the peaces and your judges have huge impacts on, or it can have huge impacts on your rental properties. And regardless of the president that gets elected, sometimes those things are more important. You could be in a state that's not necessarily a swing state that has a county that's flipping, right? And that could change policy. So let's talk about these things. So first one,
no, go for it.
Yeah. Impact of potential election outcomes on real estate markets, just in general. Let's keep it general.
Well, I think the outcomes are, it's obvious that each candidate has a different viewpoint of how they want to handle the economy and the different economic factors that they can control. And those things directly impact the real estate market. So when you lower taxes, it affects the real estate market. When you find a way to artificially drive down interest rates or not do that and drive them up or whatever, those things affect the real estate market. But they also affect consumer confidence. The things that we have going on right now have drastically impacted consumer confidence. So people aren't vacationing as much or spending as much on vacation. They're not buying things they don't need as much as they normally do. And all of that affects everything about the real estate market.
Or like the vacation rentals. If they're not going on vacation, vacation rentals take a hit, which we have also seen. So you could have changes in property taxes. Property taxes obviously affect your rentals. I mean, we like to mention we're here in Texas, so it's more of a bigger thing than maybe some other areas. But that's a state policy for the most part. There's also county and ISD policies that get added onto that. So, those things can have an effect. Like we are, our headquarters is here in Mansfield, Texas, which has arguably high ISD taxes compared to other areas. Well, it's for a good cause, but if you're buying, do you consider that whether you're even for yourself, whether you have kids or don't have kids, or you buy rental property in that. So in this specific market, there's higher ISD taxes, but it also demands higher rents because the school district
everybody wants to be in the school district.
Yeah, sought after. So that's a positive part of it, depending on how you look at it. And then you get higher level interest rates, right? Like your state's not going to affect your interest rates. That's mainly done by federal policy. And there's other things that tie into it, of course, but.
So one other aspect of this, and I know we've got a whole bunch to go through, so we're probably spending a lot of time on this one, but the rental sector particularly can be in certain cities, in certain states, depending on how, I don't want to say maybe how blue they are, right? They will become more, what's the word I'm looking for? They'll try to control rents more. Rent control, to some degree, will become more or less of an issue, and that has a major impact for landlords.
Yeah, and I've seen arguments for targeting rent-controlled properties in some areas. So, I'm not saying it's always a positive. Generally, it's a negative in considerations of investing. But there's ways that guaranteed incomes can be a consideration for depending on what you're doing. This can drive voucher policies. This can drive, rent assistance programs are heavily driven by your local elections and elected officials. So we're going to dive into some of these more. So let's go to our next one. The next one is election-driven changes in housing policy. So this is, like we just mentioned, rent control measures, affordable housing initiatives, regulations that could impact property owners.
I think a couple of things here come to mind, and this is when politicians try to drive interest rates down, which is a positive thing for the real estate market, especially where we're at right now. We need that. So they, regardless of what party is in power, they usually try to keep them down and drive them down so that people feel better, just like I said before, so they feel better about the economy. So when November 4th comes along, everyone feels good. It's not so bad. Let's just keep going with the same guy, right?
Yeah.
And whether that's what he did for 3.5 years or not doesn't seem to matter because everyone's got a short memory. So that's one of the games they play.
Well, and when you talk about interest rates and housing policy, that's it. Both parties ideally want interest rates low, right? In a perfect world, but there's effects that happen as we're seeing.
I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
I don't think both parties want interest rates low. I don't.
Well, the Federal Reserve always wants to keep them in a controlled manner, which
they want it to be at the perfect rate.
The quote unquote
whatever they think that is.
Independent Federal Reserve wants to keep it, which isn't part of our government, but we won't get into that. Let's go into tax policy.
Hey, we're trying to stay very apolitical, but the fact of the matter is that the extreme left does not like you and me, and they do not like what we do, and they do not like us helping people build wealth with real estate. They want big corporations to do it. That's just the bottom line. And that's
true. And then they like to point the finger at rent rates being the fault of landlords and property managers. So that's totally why we had a 50% increase over like a 3-4 year period, a historical increase. It's completely because we're just dicks. So I'm just kidding.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll go back to being apolitical. Hopefully. My bad.
I'll use better words next time so that we don't get this taken down. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that one might not make it on Google, huh?
No, it's okay. Let's
move on to the next one.
You can't mention Google and stay apolitical. Tax policy and real estate investing. So this is big.
That's huge.
Yeah, this is a big point. It's a big one that's in the media a lot right now. So I guess we can talk about the reality of how it affects real estate investing and the conceptual consideration as well.
Yeah, well, and so I want you to do that. But the thing about this is what people don't realize. This is one of the biggest things, and thing people forget, is that our country was founded on this right here. The reason why we even have the United States of America and we're not a province of England anymore is because we fought against taxation. Everybody was on the same page about that. The entire population of the colonies was on the same page about we don't want to be controlled by the Queen and we don't want to be taxed by the Queen.
We don't want to pay a 3% tax.
Well, yeah. So what happened to that? Well, why now? So my point is now we're all divided. Like everybody wants to pay taxes over here and nobody wants to pay taxes over here. And it's an extreme, like this is the one place in this and all these discussions where you know what you're going to get after the election. One is going to do this and the other is going to do that. One is going to increase taxes or make it harder for you to deduct or whatever. There's lots of ways to increase taxes. And one is going to do what they can to reduce our tax burden.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll say this is just a fact that both parties use the. I was talking about this yesterday. Both parties use the widespread lack of understanding of economics to gain votes. Both parties do it because people just flat out don't understand economics. Well, this is still apolitical. This is pretty much a fact. There is literally no way to tax the rich without taxing the poor in some fashion. So that's why all these policies have such a big impact on what occurs because they,
when you overtax the rich dairy farmer that makes billions of dollars making milk for you, then the poor person that has to go buy the milk now pays 50 cents or $1 more a gallon for that milk.
Yeah.
That's basic economics.
It is basic
People do not understand it. It's and they don't have a job because the dairy farmer is not hiring as many people as he normally would. Basic economics.
And the high interest rates makes the access to capital
We're having
harder.
a hard time staying apolitical here.
Well, no, these are facts. These are just economical facts, which nobody ever wants to talk about. That higher cost of access to capital will make the underlying cost of goods go up, which makes the cost to the consumer go up. It's
by the way, I don't think dairy farmers make millions of dollars. No, I think they probably struggle.
No, but the handful of companies that own the dairy farms.
I bet Borden's Farms does pretty well.
A ton of money. Yes.
Who else? Altadena. What else can you think of? Anyways, doesn't matter.
We could go on. So capital gains tax. So how does the election or the elected officials affect that? That's a big one in real estate investing, and that for example,
the biggest one.
That's the biggest one, especially in real estate investing, because you can avoid capital gains tax on your primary residence, which we've done an episode about, and I'm not going to get into that. Your investment properties will incur capital gains tax, whether it's 0% or it's 45%. It will have an effect on what you do. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you bought it for $300, it's worth $400 now. There's a $100,000 gain if you sell it. If it's a 20%, you're paying $20,000 to the IRS. If it's 45, you're paying $45,000 to the IRS. These things have an effect. These things. So if capital gains goes up to 45% for 4 years, right? If that does happen, you're going to see less real estate investors liquidate their properties, which causes a supply issue.
For sales.
It's just another, it's just one small example. And on the flip side, you can, if it goes down to 0 or close to it or whatever, because it has been there before, it won't be as much of a supply concern. Or if you have changing policies, like say it does go up to 45, and then 4 years later we think it's about to go to 0, then they're going to wait, and then another 4 years later, if it may change again, everybody liquidates at the same time. So these things have instantaneous market effects.
Yep, they do, very much so. And the one thing that you didn't touch on, which is the other half of the people that have no intention of liquidating and are holding on to their portfolio, and intend to pass that down among their upon their death to their children. That's just as impactful because these policies affect what we used to call the death tax or the inheritance tax.
Yep.
And that inheritance tax seems to change drastically with each regime that's in office. And that has a big impact too on how you set up, how much you buy, before your death and.
And these things definitely involve your strategy and considerations when real estate investing. Another big tax policy is depreciation. Depreciation rules is another huge one that swings around depending on who's setting the policy at the time. This is just a fact. Trump had to put in place a bonus depreciation for his term, and it even went into the next few that was huge in real estate investing. It allowed massive advanced write-offs on real estate profits. that primarily helped small investors. It was a primarily to help like the 1 to 10 real estate investor portfolios because there was limits on it, right? So that was a big thing too. So let's get into the next one. Tax policy is huge, but affordable housing and rental investing is also a big one. So it can shape the future of affordable housing programs.
Yeah, and we've kind of touched on this already a little bit, but so the one part of this we haven't touched on is: are your policies that the government puts out, are they encouraging these big trust funds and so forth to buy real estate, right? Like there's some environments in which they want to be buying and they buy like crazy, right? Mm-hmm. And there's some where they just sit tight, like I think is what they're doing right now, and they're not buying as much, and then they may dump some of their portfolio in a certain environment. That environment is created largely by the policies of the whatever president and their regime gets in there.
But these also come locally, so affordable housing and that type of thing. Those programs they can be set up by various entities. There can be state housing programs, there could be county, there could be city. We see all of them where we receive housing vouchers from all over the place. One thing that this is just our reflection on housing vouchers is it's always amazed me how many of them go to out-of-state people coming here. So we see so much of that they get pushed to the front of the line in front of the people who actually live here. Now, I don't know. I'm not saying I'm going to speak exactly on how that all works, but that's what we see very commonly is that they show up, they're moving from out of state. Maybe they had a voucher in another state and they get one here. Given that's paid for by tax dollars they haven't paid into at all is another consideration.
Unfortunately, you know what that is? That's budgetary. That's budgets. That does that stuff because these housing authorities have a budget of so many millions of dollars that the government prints for them for each authority, right? And they don't want to lose that, so they got to spend it.
Well, no, that's what I was going to say. That part of the policy does usually come from whoever's given the money. So even if it's county, city, they have to have a quota of whatever the federal funds tell you to do.
If we end up with $4 million at the end of our fiscal year, then next year we're going to get $4 million less. So we're going to make sure, right? And so I think that's why some of these, you and I talk about all the time, how you have certain cities that put people into other homes in other cities, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and pay for their rent. And I think what we just described is part of the reason why, but.
How does this relate to what we're talking about? Like the reason is the out-of-state people tend to, while one of the benefits to those vouchers is not just guaranteed income to a certain extent. I've even talked to some people who have built portfolios around this strategy, right? And one of the benefits was that they stay longer. They stay for 3 to 5 years on average versus the 2 to 3 that a normal tenant would stay. Well, that is changing because when it's a lot of people coming from out of state, they tend to not stay as long. They're tending to just come use it and find a place as soon as they can. Once they learn the area, then maybe they move. That's way more common. So it's reducing the average tenancy that those vouchers hold. So those things all play a part, and whether you start giving them out to non-citizens is another consideration that is happening. And I had that same person who built a portfolio around that started questioning of whether that was going to affect rent controls. So, and that's what some of these authorities have been talking about, that in addition to the voucher, they're starting to control the rents that they will give the voucher for at a higher rate than they used to do. At least, and we can only speak of that in our area because voucher programs across the country vary more than anything you'd believe.
Well, that's the other thing, and that kind of gets into the next one, the regulatory changes. But that's the other thing. You and I, we get phone calls. Hey, I got a voucher for a 3-bedroom, and they're calling on a $3,500 a month house. I'm like, how do you have a voucher for that? I'm like, well, my voucher goes to $3,600 or something. I mean, we just hear the craziest numbers sometimes. I just made that up. You're probably not getting a voucher for that much, but all I'm saying is I walk away from those phone calls shaking my head thinking, why are we giving so much money to people for a 3-bedroom home or a 4-bedroom home or whatever they need? Like if we're going to subsidize people's rent, then that's fine. Why can't they go into a $1,500 to $2,000 a month home?
And we
that's all they need.
Rarely see vouchers in that price range.
It's amazing.
Weird. It's weird. When you could probably, in that scenario, you could give 3 vouchers for that one.
Yeah.
But that's not what happens. So another one is the rent control piece of that is it has been steering people away as it has gotten stronger, especially in the voucher programs, because actual rent controls are generally like defined in like these properties in this area are under this authority's rent control. Well, the vouchers we're only going to approve this at a certain rent, and there's been some landlords have started to get annoyed with the ridiculousness of that in certain areas. Like we even had an issue recently where the rent we were trying to get this person in for was $1,435, and the housing authority came back to us after doing all the work, the inspections and everything, that we would only approve this lease if it's at $1,433. And I was like, this is how petty are you going to be? You're saying it's off by $2? How can you justify based on a market analysis that we're off by $2? And if we are, we already, extended this vacancy timeline for 2 weeks to take a housing voucher. It lost, that cost a lot more than $2. So, instantly that client's like, well, this is the last time I'm doing this. So, they're shooting themselves in the foot, with a lot of the things they do policy-wise. So all things to consider. Regulatory changes and their impact on landlords. This can involve tenant protections, eviction moratoriums, environmental regulations. We're just hitting a bunch of big ones. This is a consideration that people generally don't consider as definitely as much as they should, but it's huge.
One of our candidates thinks that the biggest problem that our population has is that their rents are too high, and that we need to control the rents and bring them down. And that is going to be the focus of that candidate. It's one of the focuses of that candidate, and there's a lot of uproar about it. And it's absolutely ridiculous not to realize that the last 4 years, everything that we buy has gone up, including the insurance for the home, the mortgage rate, the taxes have gone up enormously. These landlords some of them aren't making any money. They're not making nearly the money they were. And if they're able to go get more and still be competitive in the market, then that's why we have a free market system. So for you to create this scenario and this environment where everything goes up because of things you've done, and then go and say, well, it's all the fault of the landlords, you guys need to reduce your rent, and we're going to force you to do so, that's wrong on every level.
Well, insurance plays a huge part. No, you're good. I mean, the insurance plays a huge part of what landlords can charge for rent, right? And that drives the market. So if insurance, if people think rents have gone up, insurance has more than doubled. Like in some scenarios, it's like it's insane. Like we talk about Florida, and it's like 5-10 times. I mean, but yeah, I mean, if you own rental property, that insurance has gone up dramatically. The deductibles have.
But you know what? Let's talk about that insurance. Why insurance has gone up so much? Because the insurance company is the one out there changing roofs, fixing houses that are burning down, whatever. There's a disaster, they got to go in and fix it. And all of these things are costing twice as much. Building materials are costing twice as much. So the insurance company has to make up for that, and they have to charge more.
Yep.
In order to be able to provide the service they provide.
Well, the replacement cost of the house has gone up, but insane. Right. So that made policy things go up. And then the likelihood of, recently that, that the risks have gone up, I should say. That's how they look at it. Their risk model has gone up. Well, what's the underlying there? Is anybody attacking the price of those goods and, all these supplies and construction costs that have gone up? So, no, they just want to try to say they're going to reduce the end result. Well, you will never reduce the end result until you reduce the problem. So it has a huge play on it. But in insurance, what insurance companies are required to hold and call profit and all those things are policies. They're restricted by the government, so it plays a part. But tenant protections are huge. So we get to see a very interesting environment that we work in. We work in DFW, Dallas, big city of Fort Worth, that are pretty much divided right in the middle by two counties. And tenant protections and evictions, those are handled by the county. So you have Tarrant County, you have Dallas County. They handle, it's black and white.
Very differently.
I mean, it's black and white. It's literally completely different whether you buy a property in Tarrant County or you buy one in Dallas County. They could be a mile away. But the way that eviction process is going to go, the court's going to handle it. The protections they're going to provide that may not even be written into law, they're vastly different.
It's so much so that we hesitate or stop before buying in Dallas County. We haven't completely stopped, but we definitely think about it.
Since 2020, I will not invest in Dallas County.
Well, you have, though.
For long-term rental purposes. For long-term rental purposes. Not that our clients don't. We don't still work in it, all those things, but it's just a consideration. It's just the risk is higher when I can go have a lower risk a county over. And to me, it's the same thing.
Here's one basic difference right here. In Tarrant County, in the courts that we're used to being in, we can get somebody out in 25 to, let's call it 35 to 40 days tops. If the court is really busy, right? Sometimes it might take 40 days. We recently had one in Dallas County that literally took 90 days, didn't it?
120 days.
I missed the mark on that.
It actually would have taken another 30 had the tenant not voluntarily left after they had exhausted all legal efforts. And it's more of a policy thing. The judge, I've literally been told this by the judges, and they're if the legal timeline's 5 to 28 days, they're telling their staff the 28th day is when this gets done. And then there's you stack timelines together, and they're extending them as much as they can. That is a way that your justices of the peace that get elected and stuff like that can actually force those actions into different things. I'm not ever going to explain how this is done on our podcast, but currently in Dallas County, if you know what you're doing, for free, you can basically live in a house for 4 months. For absolutely free. I will never explain how that's done, but there's people who know how to do it, and they call them professional tenants, right? So another reason having a big property manager is so important.
Yep.
To protect you from that. So eviction moratoriums, we never would have talked about that before it happened, but it did happen, and people were, landlords.
It kind of happened.
What do you mean they kind of happened?
Well, we called them. Yeah, they kind of happened. We still did evictions during the eviction moratorium, though.
Well,
but again, you got to know how to do it.
Yeah, well, no, it still happened to the whole country. It was like a year and a half. So Texas shot it down eventually. So but it went on for 2 years or so. So do you consider as a landlord whether your federal government might one day make you a welfare agent? Maybe, but at least pick the area properly, that it will happen less. So in consideration, those two counties,
yep.
When the state knocked it down, the other county decided to do it at a city level.
Mm-hmm.
So, these things are all considerations that people should be aware of because they affect your ability to make money off these properties. If you don't make rent for 6 months, that will probably take you years to make back. That's just a fact. So next one is real estate market stability during election cycles. This one, I'm going to let you start with because you've seen it a lot.
It's typical. Yeah, I've been through a few election cycles, and it's very typical that, you come out of the busy summer months and people stop doing too much in August anyways because that's back to school. And that's also about the time during these election cycles that when they get back and everything's settled again, kids are back in school, and that's the time when normally people would start thinking about buying and selling. They don't, because now they're consumed by the media telling them about this guy or girl or whatever and what they're doing. And all of a sudden you're consumed with this upcoming looming election that's going to happen on November 4th, which is, 3 months away. And that's all everyone wants to talk about on social media. And that's all everyone wants to talk about at the water cooler at work. And people have a tendency when they talk about it to doom and gloom things on both sides. If this guy gets in, we're screwed for this reason. If this guy gets in, we're screwed for that reason. When in reality, it doesn't really matter who you get in. Really, just everybody on November 5th, everybody goes and buys and sells like normal. It's amazing.
It's more of it's investor confidence. It's a confidence thing. So it's just the act of uncertainty coming close to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's something might change soon, so I'm going to do nothing. Mindset is really where it happens. But that's where. But there's two sides of that coin. There's a famous saying, when people are fearful, be greedy. And when people are greedy, be fearful. So, which ultimately, for a lot of the reasons we've already mentioned, can affect market liquidity. So, if everybody's not selling their property, it can increase liquidity. But also increase prices and cost. And on the other side of that, it can do which affects property values and all those things.
Hey, can we skip down to investor strategies for election year volatility? I think we hit these other ones pretty well, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
That I don't know what strategies you're considering, but well, I do know what strategies you're considering. That was a dumb thing for me to say. I'm sorry. You and I are partners in our business, but but concerning this topic. I would say people need to understand in this particular environment, this is a different election cycle than most, because it's not just the election cycle that is affecting the environment and the environment coming out of the election cycle. We also had a very unusual set of circumstances coming into this election cycle, right? We've had pent-up demand for almost 2 years. We've had high interest rates and inflation happening. And all of these things are going to be impacted if interest rates start going down, inflation starts going down, people start going, the jobless rates start going down. If all these good things start happening, it is going to have an extremely positive impact on the activity in the real estate market, which means if you've got cash to spend on real estate, you should be doing it right now while you can. If you've got the ability to leverage yourself, meaning go get a loan and buy some real estate, forget the interest rates. They're going to change later. You should be doing it right now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the opposite of don't try to catch a falling knife, right?
That's a good one. I think I might.
You say grab for that thing, but that's more of a stock thing.
It's hard to catch the stock as it's coming down, and is it coming down blade first or is it coming down butt first? I mean,
well, you never know where the bottom is, but at least you're not at the top, right? That's where a lot of the mindset is.
I don't think there's a scenario. I think there's a scenario where we only get a little bit of market push from these circumstances, and there's a scenario where we get a huge extreme one. But I don't see a scenario where things stay the same too much longer. There are too many people that have been waiting on the sidelines to buy their first home, to buy their second home because their family's growing, right? And they've been waiting, or just to make a move, right? I've got a family waiting to move closer to their kids where they're going to college, and the market right now is keeping them from doing that. All of these things are impacting activity in the market, and that is going to change to some degree, either a little bit or a whole heck of a lot.
Well, and when you're talking about volatility, I am of the opinion that whatever way it goes, all these people waiting, if you're waiting, whatever you're waiting for is going to happen too quickly for you to take advantage of it. It takes you 45 days to buy a house. Mortgage rates changed drastically a few weeks ago in the matter of a week. almost 2 points in a week, and then they went back and then they came back down. And the Fed hasn't even changed anything yet. We're looking at next month where we might get a change in the actual Federal Reserve rate. It hasn't actually changed yet. So there's market influences on all these things. And like you said, I see very likelihood of scenarios where, interest rates could go back up and values could go down, but more than likely interest rates will go down, which will push values back north, especially if they go too low. So all these things have
You said it earlier, when other people are fearful, be greedy. And I think what that means, it's an oversimplified statement that is a famous statement is that Warren Buffett? He's the one who did that. But what he really
he's the one
means,
who currently gets credit for it.
I'm not sure greedy is the proper term about right there. I think what he really means is that's the time when you should be thinking in terms like we're talking about, buying. When everyone else is afraid to buy, you should be buying. When everyone else is buying like crazy, you should be sitting tight and not buying. Right? In terms of what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, and don't always listen to sentiment. Like sentiment is like, what you think you're hearing on the media and everything. So I've had a question about the fear and greed thing. Like, and I tell people there is indexes that track fear and greed on a technical basis. There's a fear and greed index. There's one for the stock market. It's called the VIX. You can literally go check. Is it greedy today? Is it, is it fearful today? Real estate market has it too. So if you are a very numbers driven person, it's a good way to check it. There's people who literally buy and sell real estate based on those indexes. All right. Warren, listening to Warren Buffett, work for him.
Greed is such a horrible word. They should change that to opportunity. What's wrong with building wealth?
Because there's always
we're turning that into
because
greed?
There's always opportunity in the market.
Yeah, but greed, well, it doesn't matter. Off topic. Greed gives me the impression that somebody is putting their wealth over all other things,
when you're
including how
buying
they treat
something,
other men.
Yeah, well, that's not what the actual word greed means, but yeah.
I think it is. I think that is what it actually means. We'll have to get back on that.
Okay, well,
another topic.
So there's various strategies, but I feel like our market is a lot less volatile to election cycles than some other ones around the country. So, like California, very volatile, because even it doesn't matter how the state is, a lot of these things are federally affected. So.
And even in the Northeast. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And we can get into all those reasons, but that feels like a different podcast.
Yeah, it definitely does. So,
it's a good topic. I think we took care of rent control already. So,
well, future of rent control post-election, will one side be more for it or more against it is...
Well, we talked about that. There is one side that's definitely more for it. And there's one side that's definitely more against it.
This guy right here.
Did I stay apolitical right there?
You did.
I didn't even use pronouns. That's pretty good. I could use pronouns for this whole thing and still stay apolitical.
If you only read the script in text, yes, that sounds very apolitical. All right. Well, if you have any questions about anything, any considerations that you may need to consider when considering a rental property during the election cycle and beyond, because these cycles are continuous, in my opinion, give us a call, 817-818-9039. Shoot us an email at showmethemoney@wearetpm.com. John, Kyle, we are TPM, and we are out.
We gone.